It really scared me one day when I was at my mate's place, and I said, "This place looks familiar." And then he looked at me like I was stupid. He says, "Tim, you helped me move in here." And I'm like,
Wow.
"Oh, is this the cost of taking all those pills? You just lost memories you didn't even know you had." And I was like,
You're listening to When God Intervenes, the podcast where faith, hope, and healing come together for families with a loved one battling addiction. All right. Welcome to another episode of When God Intervenes. I'm your host, Daryl Rogers, and I'm here today with Tim Thomas. And Tim is quite an interesting guy, and we've just been talking a little bit off camera and getting to know each other a little bit better. And Tim has a special forces background. He's based in Australia, which, I've always wanted to visit Australia, Tim, by the way, and beautiful, beautiful scenery there. And I've just always been enamored with it. And so it's on my bucket list, right? But welcome to the program, Tim. And I just want you to have the opportunity to, why don't you go ahead and introduce yourself and
"Yeah, sure."
tell the listeners a little bit more about you and how you came into the line of work that you do and how you might be able to help them.
Well, what I do right now, if someone said that this is what I'd be doing, I wouldn't believe them. And this is kind of maybe God intervened, right? But I grew up. My parents were working with the lowest of low socioeconomic people, working with the Australian Aboriginals, and it was on YouTube. There's videos called "Restoring Faith in Humanity," where somebody does an act of kindness to someone that just really needs it. And this is what I grew up with. I saw, my parents, just genuinely generous people, giving of themselves. And, but it was quite a literal interpretation of the Bible. Like, you turn the other cheek, right? So you can imagine how long it took the other kids at school to learn that they could hit the big kid in the face and he wouldn't hit back, right?
Uh,
And so it was no surprise that I actually became a professional fighter. I guess I paid all those things forward. And in Australia, I hold a few Australian titles with, submission wrestling. And, UFC is very popular these days.
uh-huh.
But back in the 90s, back in Brisbane, it was these sort of barely legal underground sort of fight scenes in biker bars. And I always remember back then you could smoke in bars and pubs. So, you
Uh-huh.
walk into the ring, you're coughing up half a lung, before you even start your fight. And then at 30, I had, Australia started this direct recruiting into special forces. So, called the DRSF scheme, direct recruiting into special forces. So they screened the civilian personnel. And then if you passed all the basic stuff, passed all the advanced stuff, you could attempt special forces selection. And this was quite new in Australia's history of military, because normally to get in special forces, you had to spend 2 full years in a regular infantry unit before you could even apply. So we were the very first lot in 2004 to go in under this scheme. And we were not welcome. We were considered civilian queue jumpers, and they deliberately tried to stop us, break us. At the School of Infantry, we've got a statistic that still stands: 300% more injuries than any other platoon to go through there. They used to crawl us, fire and movement, crawling on all fours through these cactuses, which had like 2-inch barbs on that would go through your boot. And then they'd crawl you
Wow.
through kangaroo shit. So you'd get all this bursitis. You had
Uh,
elbows as big as, we call them rock melons, but you'd say cantaloupes. But but and at 30, I was the oldest person. That was the oldest allowable age to go and do that. So everyone said, "Oh, you're too old, you're too old." But I'm dyslexic, so I see things in patterns. And what was obvious to me was this was actually the first time I've actually aged. I've never aged before, you know. So shouldn't it be me saying what I can and can't do at that particular age? And so what
mm,
I sort of saw was, it was when other people were saying, oh, you can't do that at 30 or whatever. What they were really saying is that I can't do that at 30. So I'm like, well, I
Uh-huh.
have to be sovereign here. I can't listen to anybody else. Of the 70 guys that started, there were guys younger, fitter, faster, stronger, probably smarter than I was. But I think there was a certain toughness that I had, like growing up in the 70s, getting beaten up every day at school. It was just a
Uh-huh.
Tuesday. You didn't even tell your mum and dad. It was just something that happened all the time. And it was just, some days you win, some days you lose.
Uh-huh.
And so I had a certain toughness there, but I also understood how to recover the body when the younger guys would go out drinking on their off time. I'd be, back on base doing stretching, recovery work, all that sort of stuff. When I got out in 2010, I had, like a lot of veterans, undiagnosed PTSD. And I didn't know I had a problem because I just kept on telling myself, if I can do everything I need to do at work, what does it matter that I have to drink half a carton of grog before I speak to my then wife? Yeah. I call her my then wife, not my ex-wife, because I stand for a positive view in the future. So yeah, I was living, but there was an imbalance, and it was showing up with, I could not drink, quite a substantial amount, because I'm a pretty fit, strong, stubborn guy. I
Mm-hmm.
needed a certain amount to self-medicate. And then, things reached sort of critical mass. I told my doctor that I was having trouble sleeping, and he threw a pharmacy at me, And initially I'm
Right.
like, oh, this is great. It's like long service leave in a bottle, right? But then what nobody tells you, and I'm sure people who have been through this know what I'm talking about when I say no one tells you the cost of taking these things. Like I think I lost a whole lot of memories, and a lot that I used to have just disappeared. And they also don't tell you how hard it is to get off these pharmaceuticals. If you want to have a second turn into a minute, the withdrawal symptoms of this stuff, the amount of going through your whole body.
Uh-huh.
Um, and so it really scared me one day when I was at my mate's place, and I said, "This place looks familiar." And then he looked at me like I was stupid. He says, "Tim, you helped me move in here." And I'm like,
Wow.
"Oh shite. Is this is this the cost of taking all those pills? You just lost memories you didn't even know you had." And I was like,
Uh-huh.
geez, I hope I was a good person. I'm not going to have someone come up and punch me in the face one day. And the point is, when I started getting out of that, Daryl, I started realizing there's a lot of other, in my case, veterans going through the same thing. So then I started working in veteran charities, and I had this goal of saving 40 veterans from suicide. And if I could work the rest of my life, if I achieved that, then I'd die happy. That goal was actually achieved within 1 year,
Wow.
because I saw something. Being dyslexic, I see patterns. I failed high school, but I see patterns, right? I'm in the top percentile
Uh-huh.
of pattern recognition. And the pattern that I saw was that it doesn't matter if the pain's emotional or physical, it gets to a certain duration or intensity where it transforms without the person even knowing it into something that no human can handle. It transforms into loneliness, isolation. I'm the only one going through this. And we are not built for that.
Mm.
And if you're all alone, you can't drop your guard. Because if you drop your guard for a second, something bad's going to happen. It's going to be your fault.
Mm-hmm.
And
Mm-hmm.
so quality rest just doesn't exist. So people and this is the thing, the government spends millions of dollars on veteran rehab. It's all water off a duck's back if you're not breaking the isolation and getting people out of fatigue.
Mm-hmm.
Okay,
Mm-hmm.
so all I did was break isolation, get people out of fatigue, and it was like all the crap on top of their internal compass just fell off, and then they knew exactly where to go. You know, I'm
Mm-hmm.
working off the fact that they had 95% of everything they need inside of them. They just needed to have their fatigue broken, like hear an authentic person sharing. And us blokes, the way I saw it was, we have these unspoken words in our hearts, right? And we need another. And when I say bloke in Australia, it's man, right? We
Right.
need another man who has walked that same path to speak those words that we couldn't speak for ourselves. And it's probably nothing we haven't heard before, but the person who's gone through that can shift it from here into your heart, and then their jaw pops open and they say things like, I thought I was the only one, you know,
Yeah. Yeah.
and that's the beginning of the healing process. Okay,
Mm.
but in this space, breaking the isolation, there's a bit of a trap door that, again, most people don't see, but I saw very clearly, is humans breaking isolation is super powerful. But what can happen, especially in the veteran space or even the mental health space, is they start creating these antisocial social groups. So these
Mm.
veterans could only, it felt great to break isolation, but they could only do that around other veterans. Or people who are
Uh-huh.
depressed, they can only break their isolation around other depressed people. So the
Uh-huh.
programs I set up were, I called them trampoline programs. You go in to it, but then you come out with more energy, so you can circulate in the world and be your true authentic self. And you don't need those people that have worn the uniform, who have experienced the same stuff. That those antisocial social groups pretty much take your healing and lock it into the freezer. You don't heal in those places. So all my programs were there to A, break the isolation, B, get them out of fatigue, and then get them onto the purpose that whatever they're supposed to do next. And those
Mhm.
two simple things, again, no qualifications, just lived experience. And I'm like, well, I don't know why this is working, but if I keep doing it, it keeps working. So let's just keep doing this. And I'm like, okay, wow, this is really. And one or two guys a week would come up and say, "Do you remember that conversation?" And I'm like, yeah. And they're like, well, I had everything in the car to kill myself and I didn't because of that one thing, you know?
Mhm.
So
Mhm.
I was kind of known as the guy with, a toothpick and 20 cents could do more than what other people could do with millions of dollars, simply because
Mhm.
I just saw this stuff works, man. Forget about what you think, forget about the 7 years of
Yeah.
study.
Yeah.
And the thing is, psychologists haven't realized yet that the trauma people experience goes down deeper than words can reach. Okay, so
Mhm.
simple talk therapy just isn't going to cut it when it comes down to that deep down trauma. I mean, it's nice to go talk to somebody and feel heard, and a good psychologist will tell you that 95% of their job is rapport. Which lends
Mhm.
itself to, when a human breaks their isolation, it's super powerful. Um,
Mhm. Mhm.
but but it there's a lot of psychologists feeling really powerless because they haven't been told in their 7 years of study that the trauma goes deeper than the words can reach. It's like trying to hit a target at 400 yards and your
Uh-huh.
rifle only shoots 200 yards. But these people are saying, "Oh, look at this gun! I worked 7 years to get this gun. Isn't it great? It's got a designer
Uh-huh.
name on it. I shoot it every day."
Uh-huh.
And the person, the client's like, "You're not hitting my targets," and the client then blames themselves. Oh, look at that
Right.
guy. He's got he's spent so much time and they're so good at what they do and they're telling me how good they are, and
But it's not working. So,
not
must
working.
be my fault, right?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. So I was
Yeah.
fortunate that in the veteran space, these guys were so acute in what they were doing. If you tried anything that didn't hit the target, that they would, in no uncertain terms, probably
Mhm.
language that I couldn't use on this podcast, tell you that it didn't work for them.
Mhm. Mhm.
And yeah, so
Yeah.
that was sort of where I cut my teeth in the healing process. Daryl.
Yeah, that makes a lot of sense. There's so many things that you touched on in there, and I'm like, I don't know if I can remember all of this to come back to ask you questions because they were really good. There were some really good nuggets in there. One of the things you talked about was, people isolating, and then when they found out that there was someone else that had that shared experience, that helped them start the healing process, helped them come out of isolation. And I don't see the isolation with parents, but what I do see, well, I do to some extent, because their friends do not understand and their neighbors do not understand what they're going through. And so they come into a group like there's a couple of different groups, of one that I facilitate, one that I'm a part of, that parents come into. And when they first come into the group and they've never experienced that before, and they hear other parents talking, and they're saying a lot of the same kind of things that are going on with them. It's just like you can see the light bulb go on, right? Like they need that association with that group to help them start to open their eyes and to realize that they're not the only person going through this, and to begin that healing process. I totally agree with you on that.
Mm.
And by the way, my son would love to meet you sometime because he's all into the UFC. My youngest son, yeah, he's all into the UFC and all of that kind of stuff.
Happy to have the conversation, but when we
Yeah,
were doing it, it was very dated. Like we didn't even have gloves.
right, right, yeah,
It was,
yeah.
and it was in these biker bars.
Hmm.
That boo and swear at you if you took the fight to the ground because they wanted to see a
Right,
knockout.
uh,
These days it's so much more elegant. Um,
right.
yeah, but again, happy to have the conversation because
Yeah, yeah,
I think there
yeah.
is something very potent for any human. Because what I mean, for me, martial arts, the best thing about it isn't about punching and kicking. It's about you being able to control the physical space around you. Okay,
Mhm, mhm.
so when I'm teaching people, I say think of a plant that needs to grow. Okay, it needs like little barriers around it for it to grow to a certain point, and then it can flourish. While it's still small, anyone can rip it off. So there are parts inside of us that need to grow. But if we feel like our boundaries, especially our physical boundaries, have been crossed and can be crossed again at any time, we waste so much energy looking for threat. So we're actually retarding our growth by spending so much energy in threat. Whereas, as opposed to making yourself strong, knowing that you can handle yourself, and having that confidence, that physical confidence. And the thing is, you don't even have to use it. When you've accessed the power in your body, looking behind someone's eyes, you can tell. And you're like,
Mm,
yeah, he's that person's going to push back, and you're automatically, away from that. But if there's a thing in my eye where I'm kind of scared of this stuff, then
mm.
then I kind of attract it. You know what I mean?
Yeah, yeah, and, there's an application there as well in that, the parents that I work with, they get into this because nobody ever there's no classes being taught on, well, this is what you do if you wake up one day and realize that your child is addicted to drugs or alcohol. It catches everybody by surprise. And so they get into this fear space, and there's a lack of confidence there in how to deal with that. And so as a result, there's a lack of boundaries. They don't know how to set and maintain those boundaries, because of some of the fear based around all of that. So yeah, I hear what you're saying there. I'm sure there's a way to kind of translate that what you're talking about into that
Oh,
mindset
look,
that they
the
need.
Chinese have said for thousands of years, whether it's martial arts or not, first the body, then the mind.
Hmm.
So I
Hmm.
put it to you, and this applies to me and everyone listening. There are two completely different types of people in this world,
Uh-huh.
and they're both you. They're both me. There's the you and me that's connected to their body, has an
Hmm.
abundance of energy. And then there's a you of me that's not connected to our body. We still need the energy. So, for me on a good day, that might mean a coffee. On a bad day, that might mean an extra beer. That might mean that I become an a-hole because I need energy, but I've been able to generate it for myself. So I have to take it from others. And then you realize why there's so many a-holes in the world because they don't know how to generate and they've got to get it. So they've got to take it from someone else. And we've all been
Right.
taken from, okay. And
Uh-huh.
and
Uh-huh.
and it's very easy to think, well, I'm going to take back from that person, but it's like trying to get money out of someone who's broke. They took from you because they're broke. If you go after them, you're going to be two broke people. But if you can, invest, energy's like money. How you invest it's how you get it back. All right. So my
Mm.
vision for myself and everyone I work with is to be an energetic millionaire. Find out the investments that you do with yourself that return a massive return. Because here's what happened when I was doing all that great work in the veteran space, saving 40, I stopped counting at 40 within a year of veteran lives saved. Um, what nobody knew is every 6 to 7 weeks, I'd have to hit the bottle really hard for 3 days. Because what was happening, Daryl, was I was giving of myself. I wasn't giving of my abundance. Okay, so
Mm.
here's the difference. So these days, I don't give of myself anymore. I give of my abundance. So if I'm adequate, if I'm at 100% and I give somebody 10%, there's a part of me saying, you better do something with that, because I'm down to 90%, right? There's attachments. There's attachments to that generosity, which it's really not being generous if there's attachments. But let's just say I invest in myself, create an abundance, and I'm at 500%. I can give 20% away a day easily, and people can love it, hate it, tell me to get lost. I'm not attached to that because I'm in touch with something so much bigger than what can be taken. Okay, I'm just going to say that again. When you're in touch with something so much bigger than what can be taken from you, life occurs very differently. Because for me, all fear is attached to fear of loss. So when I went to Afghanistan, I did all the things needed to make my peace with death. I made all my videos to my kids. I got 2 kids, my then wife. I got some really good life insurance. So, they could be in Australia, we call it body bits, so you can, because obviously we're getting blown up. And if you lose bits, you can insure different parts of you, right? So I got some really good insurance and I'm like, right, I'm ready to die. And I was fearless to the point where I could enjoy myself. Right. And here's the thing. We did the whole deployment, right? And in special forces, we're pretty busy, right? Day and night. And we got to this last mission. And it wasn't a particularly high threat scenario as it was classified. But before stepping off and marching in, I remember thinking, oh, you know what? Looks like I'm going to survive this. Oh, it'll be good to see the family again. It'll be good to go on holidays. And it was at that moment that I started shitting myself. I started becoming so fearful because I had something I didn't want to lose. And then that fear took away from me in that moment. And the way I sort of describe it to people, Daryl, is, you and I, we have bodies, right? And if we put those bodies on a scale, it would be a certain measurement of mass. In Australia, we're in kilos, you're in pounds. So you would be, 195 pounds, I'm guessing. Yeah. Okay.
Yeah.
And anyway, because that's a measurement of mass, that's stuck if we're in Australia at 8:06 in the morning. Okay. But if we both own something on top of a body, we both own minds. So if we put that mind on a set of scales, you couldn't weigh it because it doesn't contain mass. Now that's an obvious thing, but it needs to be stated that because our mind doesn't contain mass, it can go forward in time. It can go back in time. Now, our minds aren't omnipotent. They have a processing power. Let's just call it 100% of processing power. So when I was about to step off on that last mission, there was a percentile of me going forward and worrying about something that hadn't happened yet in the future. And that was taking up, let's say 40% of my processing power. And so that then put me to 60% in that moment. And then I started thinking, oh, what would happen if, the kids grew up without a dad, and that took it away another 40%. So I was down to 20%. So the more my mind was away from my body, the less processing power I had in this point, and then the higher likelihood of me getting the outcome I didn't want. You see how that works? So the more my processing power dropped, the more my mind left my body into something that hadn't happened yet, or even stuff in the past, the more the likelihood of something bad happening increased. I could go through a doorway, if there was it could be a machine gun, could be a woman and a baby, but if I'm in the very low state of processing power, then my decision making isn't as sharp, isn't as empowered.
Right.
So I had to go to those sort of extreme experiences to get certain formulas that I like sharing with people, to have them understand that essentially our mind, this thing that doesn't contain mass, all it wants is stimuli. All right. That's all it wants. This is my understanding of it. And if you've ever wondered why you can have 100 good things happen and only one bad, and only remember the bad, it's because the bad stuff is usually the high stimuli, right?
Yeah. Yeah.
And so our mind, if it's not stimulated, will go to the highest level of stimuli, which is usually negative, right?
Mm-hmm.
So, the ancient Chinese saying, first the body, then the mind, means that if you activate this body, you physically move it, you physically engage it, you very conveniently give your mind the stimuli it needs from your own body. And then your mind's like, oh, that's great. I got the stimuli I need. I can be in this moment now. You know what I mean? And
Mm-hmm.
then you've
Mm-hmm.
got your processing power for the next 24 to 36 hours. So that's why
Right.
it's so
Yeah.
important to have to win the first half an hour of the day with some sort of physical engagement. My favorite thing is breath work, so
Uh-huh.
you can give your mind the stimuli it needs so it doesn't go wandering and thinks about the highest stimuli thing, which is usually the negative.
Mm-hmm.
You know
Mm-hmm.
what I mean? So if you ever wondered why you always worry about stuff, is because worry is high stimuli, and if we don't we've got this thing in our head that can't be held, contains no mass. And
Uh-huh.
and and a wise person knows if you don't choose the stimuli for yourself, the choice gets made for you.
Right. Yeah. Yeah. When, so you're really talking about the information there, your mind, not your brain, but your mind, the information that's contained, just like the information that's contained in a computer hard drive. There's no mass there, right? And I get that. There's several things that you mentioned that kind of caught my attention. I've made some notes here. I'm going to try to hit those. Going back a little ways, you talked about the trauma a little bit, and it's been my experience that a good number of, probably most kids who, when I say kids, young adults, or even older adults who are battling drug or alcohol addiction, that there's some kind of underlying trauma that needs to be dealt with that hasn't been dealt with yet. You've worked with veterans with PTSD, and you've touched on that a little bit. Man, I got so many things I want to ask you, but I guess let's start with that. In terms of, like, I see a lot of times, kids or young adults go to a treatment program and maybe get a therapist or both, and they come out of these treatment programs and they go right back in, and it's like they're in a revolving door with treatment. And a lot of times it's because the parents are not doing their part in terms of, or don't understand what they need to do sometimes in terms of setting the boundaries, in terms of getting stronger themselves, building their own resiliency. But a lot of times it's because that underlying trauma has not been successfully addressed in the treatment programs. So, what
Yeah,
do you
yeah,
have
yeah.
to say about that? What are your
Oh,
comments or
don't get
thoughts
me started. So it's not until, and good lead in, Daryl. You're doing really good, by the way. I know this is your first
that?
couple podcasts, so
Thanks.
yeah. But look, it's not until you have a chronic illness that you realize we're not in an age of information. We are in an age of marketing. First 6 pages of Google are marketers. All right. And
Right.
marketers are really good at speaking those unspoken words inside your heart. And you're like, oh, shut up and take my money, right?
Right.
And the amount of and in my case, it's been veterans have gone to seek help, and they say, you know what, the help didn't help. In fact, it made it worse. So I just want to explain the difference between a marketer and a healer. Okay, a marketer, they are really good at saying, look, here's the one thing that you need, and it's going to knock it out of the park. And when people are hurting, they do want that one thing. Everyone's looking for Superman when they're hurting, right? And they'll give you a small taste of what you think you want, but then as the years go on and repeat sales, repeat sales, repeat sales, you're not getting connected to the power that you were essentially promised.
Mhm.
Okay. So, but what a healer will do, and you got to remember, first pick 6 pages of Google, marketers. Healers aren't as obvious. All right. And we have to get away from the idea that right now, you have to understand we're getting marketed to everywhere you go. I defy anyone to walk down the street and not have a billboard where you put your eyes, right? That's why I love
Right.
walking in nature, right? So there's so many loud voices in the room, and healers aren't the loudest voice in the room. So you have to become a seeker, all right, of knowledge, which is not something most people have ever experienced, because everything, if I want food, I push a button on my phone and it arrives on my door. I don't have to work for it. Okay. So the good news is healing takes far less time than you think. The bad news is finding the right healer. That's what takes you time. Okay. It took me
Uh,
6 years to find the right healer.
mhm,
All right.
mhm.
Because most of these psychologists, God bless them, they don't know that their words aren't hitting the targets. Okay. Trauma
Uh-huh.
goes deeper than words can reach. All
Uh-huh.
right. Um, so, so understanding that not all healers are born equal, and that's me saying it nicely. All right. And they're kind of like coffee shops. There's one on every corner. They all say they've got the best, but you've got to find the one that works for you. So you have to dedicate a certain amount of time to find the right one that works for you. And usually, in my experience, the best people to speak to are people that have gone through the problem you're up against, and they're living a life that you want to live. Because there's a lot of people dealing with it. They're not dealing with it successfully, but they're full of advice and they love
Right.
company. They're quite
Yeah.
happy to waste all your time, but you wanna put your seeker self into gear and find the people that are successfully living the life the way you want to live it. And they're the people that will usually have the breadcrumb trail. The thing that took them 10 years to figure out, they can sometimes help you in one conversation. And just to give context to this, and we're going to go dark for a little bit. When I stuck my hand up for help in 2011, it was April. I'd reached rock bottom, and I thought the right thing to do was see a psychologist, right? And I'm completely freaking stressed as hell driving to this place. And this guy, and it wasn't cheap, man. It was like over $200 to see this guy. And I'm
Mhm.
like, okay, well, if he's, this is what you pay to get someone good. And this guy wasn't just incompetent, he was apathetic. And after I told him all the stuff that I'd seen and done and rah, rah, he said, "Oh, do you think it was a problem with your mum and dad?"
Mm.
And that's when everything just went still. That second tick, 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 and the clock went zhunk. And I
Mm.
saw very clearly that he had a psychology degree behind him on the desk. And I knew it was a glass frame. And I was going to feed it to him because in my disassociated state, it made a lot of sense to remove this guy because he's supposed to be a healer and yet he's causing pain.
Uh,
So it
mm.
makes sense to remove him. And so I get out of
Mhm.
my chair to do this, right? And I then feel a hand on my chest saying, "Tim, red light. You are the toughest mofo you know. And you are struggling in a system that doesn't seem to want to help you.
Mhm.
How many other people are struggling just like you?" And I sat back down, and that's when I saw them. I saw thousands of people left and right of me, willing me on because they're looking in saying, "Tim, if you can find a way forward for you, you can find a way forward for us." And that was how I broke my isolation in what I was doing. And that's how I started moving forward, because it wasn't just me doing a singular act. It was me and 1,000 other people, me and 10,000 other
Mm.
people. So I just encourage everyone who's listening to this, whatever you're up against right now, ask yourself a genuine, honest to goodness question. How many other people do you think are in this same situation right now? And give it a number. Don't make it ethereal. Don't say lots. Give it a real number, like genuine number. Like in my case, I was thinking hundreds of thousands, but whatever it is. Okay. Now picture those people left and right of you willing you on. Because if you can find a way forward for you, you can find a way forward for them. It might take you a week, a month, a year, a decade, but that's how much time you're going to be able to save these other people. Like people probably you haven't even met yet are going to say, "I'm so glad that in December 2024 you started making decisions to move you forward, because you've made us move forward in far less time." um
Mhm.
and I think that in and of itself equips a person to then, like I said, it took me 6 years to find a good psychologist, and he did for me in 15 minutes what no one else has been able to do, and it could probably do in 50 years, right?
Right.
Um,
Yeah.
and I've since, being in the veteran space, referred a heap of people to him, and and they've had the same amazing results, right? But there's no way I would have done that had I not been connected to all those people left and right of me. And if you really want to go through the looking glass, if you really want to go through this, then if you're getting anything from this, Daryl, if anyone listening to this is getting something from this, then you were there with me in 2011, willing me on. Because if you weren't there willing me on, I'd probably be in jail right now.
You're describing my experience to a large extent in that, I did not have the answers. I did not know where to turn when I was going through the issues with my son. And unfortunately, I didn't learn what I needed to learn until after my son passed away. But what I can teach parents now is how to manage their emotions and in how to set and maintain those healthy boundaries, because once you can get control of those emotions, you can manage those boundaries. You learn how to you mentioned worry earlier. You learn how to manage the worry and the fear and all of that, and then and how to find joy in life right in the midst of the storm that you're going through. And that's what I had to learn how to do. On the other side of it, with the grief that I was dealing with, I didn't have anything positive. I'm like, what am I going to do positive with this grief? So I had to turn it in on myself and work on myself, because I didn't have any control over anything else, any other people. So it's like, I have to work on me. And that's my message to the parents out there listening is, you can't control your child. You can influence them. You can have some positive influence, but the best way to do that is to start working on yourself and to grow spiritually and to grow personally, to get stronger so that you can withstand the storm. I want to talk about you talked about energy being taken from you. I want to talk about that a little bit, because what does happen with the parents when they get in this space where they have a child battling addiction and they get on this emotional roller coaster, they end up just they will call me, and their energy level in terms of what they can handle, it's not at a zero, it's at a minus number. It's
Yeah,
way
yeah.
down in the
They're
tank.
drowning and they're clawing at anything around them.
Yeah, just trying to like climb out of this hole that they're in, and they're like, "What do I do?" They are literally exhausted. It's like they have this giant weight on their shoulders that they're carrying around everywhere they're going, because
Yeah,
they're trying to control this situation, and you can't control it.
yeah. We
So,
work off the assumption that because they're my child, I've got all the answers.
right,
Where's that written down? Where is it written down? Because that's my child. I've got all the answers, and I can solve everything. Like I've
right,
never seen that written down somewhere, you know.
right, yeah.
But until you challenge that thinking, until I actually go, you know what, I can't control this,
Mhm.
and yeah. No, so I cut you off there. Please continue on, Daryl.
No, no, no. You're right on. You're right on the right path there, and so we agree on that. That they have to let go, learn how to let go of the attempts to control, and they have to learn how to manage that worry and fear. So that brings me a little bit to one of your specialties is sleep, and we touched on it. You and I touched on it a little bit when we talked earlier about exercise.
Mhm.
And you talked about the breath work. And so what I'm getting at here is, these parents in they have to learn how to manage this stress. I'm convinced that most of them who come to me are suffering from PTSD, just from what they've been through with their child.
Yep.
And so speak to that a little bit, like, talk about the exercise and the breathing and the
Oh,
sleep, because I've struggled with sleep from time to time. I think
yeah,
we
yeah.
all do. And
Yep.
talk about how important that is And then we'll get to the decisions and decision
Okay.
making a little bit later.
Often when we're fatigued, we make bad decisions. And often when we make bad decisions, we get fatigued or we're not sleeping well. And one feeds the other. And it can be this spiraling down. And think about it like we spoke about the body and the mind's got a processing power. Your processing power is going down 5% a day, 5% a day. And before you know it, you're struggling and you can't help but, claw from others. And you don't even know you're doing it. I asked the question, what is the best thing I could do for anybody? And for me to answer that would be improve their sleep. Okay, easier said than done, right? But this is how I became successful in the veteran space, because I could actually improve sleep. And it used to annoy the hell out of me where people would talk about stuff and not give me something I could do immediately. All right. So just for everyone listening, by the end of this podcast, I'm going to show you how to completely relax your body in 3 breaths. Okay, body and mind, 3 breaths. So just know that on the back of this, I don't want to give you words. I was frustrated as hell. Words. So I live this. What I don't need to hear more about it. Okay, point I'm trying to make here is in the special forces, we used to target our enemy's sleep because we knew if we could take their sleep out for 3 days, it would mess them up better than a bullet. They would not be functioning. All right. They'd be worried about everything else that's happening. They would no longer be sovereign individuals. When we speak about getting ourselves right before we can help others, sleep is probably the most determinant factor. Sleep is somewhat unspectacular, but the way I put it to people is I invite them to think of everything you have in your life, work, play, relationships. The quality of all those things is relative to the quality of your sleep. All right. Sleep is the soil from which everything grows. But the world we live in, it's not health and fitness, it's health and beauty. Okay. Everything's got to be seen. So whatever's above the ground. So if you don't have a trunk, speaking of the tree metaphor, if you don't have a trunk the way you want it, I've got to buy something to fix that. If I don't have the fruit in my life that I want, people will sell me something to get the fruit that I want. But someone who truly understands how to make you grow and get strong, it'll go into the unseen. Okay. The sleep is where we get all our power from. It's unseen. And unfortunately, in our society, it's become almost a bragging point. I only got 3 hours sleep last night. I'm fine. What are you complaining about? We're all doing it. And so we think it's normal. But just like there's an accumulative negative effect, the more you sleep poorly, the more your performance dips. As you start making sleep a priority, the more everything gets better. Your blood pressure, your functioning, how you negotiate with the day. And like I said, there's 2 completely different types of people in this world, and they're both you. There's the you with your roots in good soil, and there's the you with your roots in poor soil. And the thing that makes me excited about this, Daryl, isn't so much, yes, the first stage needs to be getting sleep better, but all of us have these seeds of greatness, seeds of uniqueness in us. And when the soil is right, they grow. So sleep is one thing that if you improve, you start seeing all these other things growing and flourishing in your life. But it's unseen, it's unspectacular, and society sort of thinks it's normal to have it as poor sleep, as a normal thing. So I'm going to show you now how okay. And this is, again, coming from somebody who lost 6 years of his life to pills. I didn't know breath work was something you could use to alkalize your neural pathways. Breath work was something you could use to reduce the inflammation. I got a lot of chronic injuries from carrying heavy stuff in the army. I didn't fly helicopters like you, Daryl. I probably worked hard. But for those listening, when you're in defense, it's part of your job to give other people a hard time, because no one works as hard as you. Infantry guys are particularly bad for that. But look, the point I'm trying to make here is I want to show you something that is going to powerfully impact your body and mind. And it's something you can take away from this. Now, I've, of course, we'll talk about what you can, if you want to have more of what I'm offering in a second, but I want to give you something right now you can use. And I'm going to do it with you, Daryl. You okay to do a little breath work activity?
Sure.
So
okay.
So anyone listening to this, all you need to do is be in a safe environment. Ideally, don't be driving, but be seated or even laying down. And all we're going to do is I'm going to show you how to take a full breath of air. The problem with breath work isn't the fact that it's hard. It's we've been doing it our whole lives. So it's our most ingrained habit. So if you've got a habit of doing anything, it's really hard to it feels awkward to break that habit. And I'll put it to you that if you saw someone going, they're about to freak out, right?
All right.
That's shallow chest breathing.
Mm-hmm.
And when we breathe like that, we can get ourselves pumped up.
Mm-hmm.
And if you're shallow chest breathing, you're sending a signal to your whole body that you're in fight or flight. So what I'm trying to get people to see is it's not a set of lungs that we own. It's a medicine cabinet with a lot of different shelves. You breathe a certain way, you elicit a certain response. When I'm working with high school students, I'll show them how to breathe a certain way to focus past stress and do their exams and have their brain functioning correctly. When I'm working with athletes, it's amazing how many athletes don't know how to breathe properly. I'll show them how to get a proper full breath of air. When I'm working with corporates, it's a quick reset. When I'm working with people that want to go to sleep, it's a different way. When I'm working with people that want to get out of bed, there's a different kind of breath work. So it's a medicine cabinet with a lot of different shelves that we have in our chest. And we can use that to self-medicate when we need it. So when I was addicted to pills, I didn't just have pills in the medicine cabinet. I had it by my bed, in my car, in the fruit bowl, scattered in all these different places so I could self-medicate whenever I wanted to. So now I use my breath work for my self-medication. So I'm going to show you something right now. I call it my circuit breaker. When I've got stuff in my head that I don't want there, I'll show you how to break the circuit. Okay. And I'll walk you through it.
Okay.
So all we need to do for those who are listening is just gently breathe in. Breathe in. Now breathe in again and again and again. Feel that little bit of extra space. Just let that go. All right. So you probably felt it up here. Okay. So for the sake of giving it a word, we're going to call that your secondary inhale. All right. So let's try and make that a bit smoother now. We're going to breathe in and then try and breathe into that secondary inhale space. Let's just do that again. Breathe in. Awesome. Awesome. Let that go. Let that go. Nice work. All right. So now I'm going to show you how to turbo boost that. Now, you didn't know this, but in your thumb and fingers, you've got a turbo button. All right.
Okay.
and when you push them together really hard, that's going to turbo boost your secondary inhale. So you're going to breathe in on your own, but when it comes to the secondary inhale, I want you to drive like you're pinching your thumb into your fingers as hard as you can, and that'll boost your secondary inhale. Let's give that a little try.
Okay.
So just have your fingers ready, start breathing in on your own, and then hit your turbo buttons. Breathe in, hit your turbo buttons. And notice how it sort of gave it a bit of a boost. Did that work for you there?
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
All right. So this space up here is often where we hold a bit of tension. So when we breathe up there, kind of feels like we're stretching. And people often just naturally start smiling after they breathe up there. And sometimes they even cough because they haven't breathed in this space for a long time. So what we're going to do now is take this to the next level. We're going to expand our secondary inhale even more. So I want you to think of your turbo buttons and your chin, right? Think of it like a triangle.
Okay.
And this is your power triangle, right? And what we're going to do is when we get to the secondary inhale, I'll just turn on the side. We're going to raise our chin and look at the ceiling as we sort of press our pushing our chin up and our turbo buttons back. All right.
Okay.
So let's just do that. So breathing in on your own, then hit your turbo button and raise your chin and raise your chest.
All right.
Breathing in, hit the turbo button, look up, look up, look up, raise your chin, raise your chin, raise your chin, raise your chin. And then just let it go.
Okay.
Did you feel a bit of extra space?
Oh, yeah. Yeah.
Now, again, you've been breathing your whole life. You've got a certain way of doing it. Give yourself,
Mm-hmm.
be gentle on yourself. This is a whole new way of doing things. Okay. So all I'm going to do is get
Mm-hmm.
you to do that one more time and make it really smooth. But what I want you to
Okay.
do is, not many people hitchhike these days, but it's like you're trying to turn your wrists backwards, right? And so we're turning
Okay.
our wrists backwards as we're trying to look at the ceiling. Okay. Because when we look at the ceiling, our front sternum opens up. Okay. And
Mm-hmm.
I just want to speak to this for a second. When we are feeling flat and low, we cover over, we sort of protect our heart. But when we
Uh-huh.
breathe up and open our chest and breathe properly, we get proper alignment through our body. Okay. So
Okay.
let's just do this again. So everyone
All right.
have your turbo buttons ready. Okay.
All right.
And we're going to be rolling our hands back as we raise our chest up as we breathe
Okay.
in.
All right.
Okay. So when you're ready,
All right.
breathe in, then hit your turbo buttons, raise your chin, raise your chest, look to the roof, look to the roof, look to the roof. Now, I just want you to hold your breath and just wriggle your shoulders back and forth. Wriggle your shoulders. Feel how you can open up that space. Just push your shoulders back and forth. Wriggle, wriggle, wriggle. Wriggle your shoulders. Move them back and forth. Feel like you're pushing that air around, and then just let it out with a sigh.
Yeah. Wow. Okay. All right. You just about put me to sleep there.
Well, yeah. And Daryl, that's only half the breath.
Okay.
We're only halfway there. That's your top half. Now we're gonna move it down to our bottom half. Now, this
Okay.
top half, what
Uh-huh.
I call it, this is your breath of possibility. So when I feel like something's impossible, this is my
Mm.
circuit breaker. So if something's bothering me, if there's something in my head, I will squeeze my fingers, and I can do it discreetly if I'm in public, and I'll raise it up here. I'll make what's
Uh-huh.
impossible possible by getting
Uh-huh.
rid of the tension in this upper part of my chest.
Okay.
So this becomes like my circuit breaker. No, I don't want that
Mhm.
stuff in my head. Yes, I want it possible. Okay. And you practice this in your own time. So it becomes like
Mm.
it becomes your medicine. Okay. Just like I would take medicine, have it all the time. This is now my
Mhm.
medicine. Okay.
Mhm. Mhm.
So what we're going to do now is go from breath of possibility to breath of peace. Now, breath of peace, I'll just move this down, is in your, is in your belly. So
Uh-huh.
we're gonna breathe in, up, we're gonna hold it, we're gonna let it fall down, fall down, fall down, fall down. It's like we're sort of rolling down a toothpaste tube, and we're gonna put it in our bellies. Okay, in
Okay.
our bellies. And we're gonna hold
Mhm.
it there.
Okay.
And then we're gonna let it out really slowly with a so it's like your mouth is stopping it coming out, but your belly's pushing it out. So it's going.
Mhm.
So this is the part where you need to be seated or laying down, because sometimes this can relax you so much where you just sort of collapse and fall asleep, right?
Okay.
And this is just one breath, okay?
Okay.
And give yourself time. You'll probably take 3 or 4 goes at this before you get the full effect. All right.
Mm.
So
Mhm.
so let's just do what we did, and I'll coach you through it. So get your turbo buttons and your chin ready.
All right.
Just breathe in on your own, and then hit your turbo buttons. Look to the roof. Look to the roof. Hold it up there. Hold it up there. Now hold your breath and just move it around the place. Stretch out that possibility. Stretch it out. Feel it stretching out. That should feel really good. Now, holding your breath, let it fall from your chest down. Let your head collapse down. Let your head go forward. Let your head go forward. Push it down. Put your hands on your belly. Put your hands on your belly. Feel that air in your belly. Push it down low, down below your belly button. Feel it pushing down low, 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 low. Now pressurize it. Let your head sort of fall down a little bit. Let your head fall down, and then let it out with a as long as possible.
I didn't follow the instructions all the way because I started letting my air out a little too early there.
No, that's fine. We're going to do this again because I want you to
Uh,
get this. I want other
okay.
people to get this, because if they can get this, then all this blah
Mhm.
blah blahing we're doing, this to me, permanency is more important who are these people that are engaging with us that aren't in this room
Mm.
right now? What do they have immediately afterwards? What do they have a week later, a year later? Okay.
Right.
Because I withdrew from public life about 2 years ago when I got a letter from a high-ranking Army officer saying I'd just done a workshop at the Army base, and he said the corporals and sergeants were coming up to him saying that that was the first good night's sleep they had in 5 years. He thought that was really good. I thought it was terrible. They hadn't been sleeping in 5 years. But then what he
Mm-hmm.
said next made me withdraw from public life, because he says it was good when you were there, but do you have anything for them when you're not there? And I'm like, I am not permanent. I might be powerful and positive, but I'm not permanent. So, that's why I've spent the last couple of years creating breathwork in bed, which, has these coached breathing sessions that
Mm-hmm.
fall out of your phone twice a day. You just tell it when you want to go to sleep, when you want to wake up. We take care of the rest, because tired people just say, here's what I want, take care of it for me, right? So
Uh-huh.
that's why I've re-accessed public life again, because I love having conversations, but I failed my own P test. Powerful, positive, permanent. I wasn't permanent. And you know, if people just take away this, and this is why we're spending time on it, then there's a
Mm-hmm.
chance for permanency. Of course, if they've got a phone, they can download something that'll express this, twice a day, and help them go to sleep with peace, wake up with power. But
Mm-hmm.
we're going to do this a couple more times,
All right.
because again, this is something that people can really, and you can get from as well. So let's just get your turbo, get yourself comfortable. Okay, get your turbo buttons ready,
All right.
and start with breathing out, 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 and then breathe in, and then when you're at that point, hit your turbo buttons, look to the ceiling, in. Now hold it, wriggle it around. You're holding your breath, just wriggle it around. Now keep holding your breath and let that air fall from your upper chest through your middle chest. Let your head collapse forward, roll your shoulders forward, hold your breath, roll your shoulders forward, put your hands on your belly, Now hold it down in the belly, push it down low into your belly, feel it filling up like a balloon, and then let it out with a as slow as you can, as long as you can, slow as you can, long as you can.
Wow. Okay. Yeah, I'm getting more and more relaxed for sure. Yeah.
Now,
Mm.
without sort of laboring the subject, it's usually the
Mm.
third time people actually get a feel for it. So we're going to do it one more
One more
time,
time. Okay.
and you'll be able to feel it more, and letting your
Mm-hmm.
body collapse down like a sort of a rolled up toothpaste, feeling it down low, pressurizing it, and then letting it out with a super slow. So we're going to do this
Okay.
one last time. I encourage people to do
Okay.
it at home. It's the third time people normally get it. That's why I'm sort of, spending a bit more time on this part.
Okay.
Get
Okay.
your turbo buttons ready. Get your chin ready. Okay. Breathing in. Open up, open up, open up. Roll your thumbs back. Roll your shoulders back. In. Move it around, holding your breath, That should feel really amazing. Letting it fall from your upper chest through your middle chest. Put your hands on your middle chest and move it down to your belly. Put your hands down low, just around your belly button, Push it into your belly button. Collapse your head forward, relax your shoulders, relax your arms, squeeze your belly, and let it out with a so keep squeezing your belly and letting it out with a as long as possible. Just let everything relax, let everything go, let everything just melt. Let it all melt. Let your shoulders melt, your back melt, your arms melt, and just let your weight be supported by the chair you're sitting in. So often in our tension, we don't allow ourselves to feel supported. So just let that chair take your weight. It should feel really, really good.
I need a pillow.
Yeah.
Yeah, I can see how that could help you fall asleep for sure. Yeah. And relax, totally get relaxed. Yeah.
And without getting woo woo, to me,
Uh-huh.
to me, when we breathe, we take on the nature of air. Okay. If you try
Mhm.
and hold air, you can't. Your hand goes straight through it. So
Mm,
and that's air's nature.
mm,
And so when we breathe, we take on air's nature. Air can't be held. Air doesn't allow us to hold on to things. It doesn't allow us to hang on to our tension. It doesn't allow us to hang on to our stress. It literally displaces this stress. And what I noticed, especially with people in stress, is they can be so focused on an external threat that they forget about their body. And their body can be
mm,
tired, it can be messed up, it can have all sorts of problems with it, but you're so focused on something outside of yourself that you've lost connection to your own body.
mm,
So
mhm,
when I do breathwork techniques with guys and girls, um, what happens is they reconnect to their body, and their body goes, "Oh, in your case, Daryl's listening to us. Hey, Daryl, we're really tired." You know,
mm,
so
mhm.
when I'm running these activities, I always have a bunch of cushions around the place because
Uh-huh.
you can see that, and then they're like, and then their body's like, "Hey, we're really," and then boom, they hit the floor just to relax. Not
Uh-huh.
collapse, but they go into that sleep because they're finally connected to their bodies and they're listening to their bodies.
Thinking about the book of Genesis, when God created Adam, going back to Adam, he breathed life into Adam, right? And I think there's some people that get hung up on breath work, from thinking it's some kind of new age thing and all of that. And I just, um, from my experience, it's more of a physical. I don't know how I want to explain it. There's nothing personally for me. It's all about. I won't say there's nothing spiritual, but it doesn't affect my spirituality or my connection to God or my beliefs. Has nothing to do with any of that. It's all about, you know, it's a physical thing. And like I shared with you earlier that I do some breathing exercises in the morning that are pretty much the opposite of this to get my day going, but we don't use our lungs. I mean, you know what I mean? Like very few people
Yep.
really exercise their lungs and really fill up their lungs.
Most people, without knowing it, are telling their body they're in fight or flight. They've always got to be focused on something else. And here's the thing that breath work can do for you: you can connect so deeply to your body that all the things that you were searching for, you can give to
Mm,
yourself, you know.
mm,
And I put it to you, I've got a connection to spirit. And if I'm tired and not sleeping, my connection to God is interrupted. If I'm
mm,
hanging on to tension, my connection to God interrupts. So is it a purely physical thing? If it allows
mm.
you to create more love, more peace, more joy, you will know them by their fruits if we're going biblical.
Right.
So
You
if what
know,
you're doing is
y-
creating
you're
more love, more joy, more peace, yeah.
well, I mean, in your mind, your brain functions better too when you get the blood flow going and you've got more oxygen, you're oxygenating your blood and everything. So, um, you know, I knew I had something else I was going to say about from the physical aspect of this. But yeah, it really helps me get my day started better when I do the breathing exercises in the morning. So I know, and I also do. So I know the opposite is going to help me sleep better, right? And I know that, I also do cold showers in the mornings.
Yep.
As part of my morning routine. Not every morning, but it creates a dopamine release, a natural dopamine release that lasts for hours. And is most people, they hear that cold showers, they're like, I'm not doing that ever. Well, if you ever do it, you will be like, man, I need to do that more often because it works, right? Just like this works in terms of from a if you want to go there, is from a strictly physiological standpoint, it has benefits. And I want to say this: my dad lived to be 90, but do you know what really took his life in the end? I mean, there were several things going on there, but it was pulmonary fibrosis. His lung tissues began to harden, and he could not, his lung capacity went down. And it makes me wonder if he had done breathing exercises earlier on, if
Yep.
he had started that, would he have lived a few years longer, maybe even.
Well, look, my 80-plus-year-old father was going to all sorts of medical appointments for pain and this and that. And then when I put him on some breath work,
Mm,
he said it was the best thing that's ever happened to him. You know,
yeah.
and it's so funny what we take for granted. Even my business partner, because for 38 years he hadn't slept properly, and so I prescribed him some breath work. And 8 days later, I checked in, and he says, "Tim, for the last 8 days, I've slept amazingly, except one night when the dog was barking. But this everything changed for him, a 38-year habit, because he was breathing correctly. And because breath work is both conscious and unconscious,
Hmm.
it's very important to have the right medicinal dose. And then for that, you need to be coached correctly. Because if I just start breathing, my head will just drift, right? But
Right.
and this is why I've made the breath work in bed app so people can have that when they want it, how they want it, and getting out of bed with that heavy feeling, breath work done right changes that lead into gold. And
Hmm.
and
Hmm.
more than that, I didn't want to just activate people's bodies. I wanted to activate their minds. So part of the offering in the morning routine is people get mirror work where they say positive affirmations in the mirror, and that again is super powerful. To start your day connecting powerfully to your body, connecting
Hmm.
powerfully to your mind, because
Hmm.
to me, the likelihood of me making powerful connections outside of my skin start with powerful connections inside of my skin.
Yeah. Yeah. Man, I had a thought there. I'm getting so many thoughts about this. It's hard to,
Yeah,
I lose
and
one.
anyone
You
who's
know what I
listening to
mean?
this, this is a very rich conversation. So you
Mm,
might need to listen to it again 3 or 4 times because there's
mm.
been a lot of juice in this. The juice
There
is worth
has
the
been. There
squeeze.
really has been. I think our interactions have been really good. And in terms of the breath work, again, we exercise our bodies. We do things to exercise our minds, but how much do we really exercise our lungs? Outside of whatever breathing you do
Yeah.
with your exercise, if you have to breathe heavy, but many of
Well,
us
you want to
get
hear something? You want to hear something fun?
what's
A
that?
fun a fun fact that I completely exploited when I was the oldest person on selection, right? And there were guys younger, fitter, faster, stronger than I was, but I understood how the body worked. And the body has a ranking structure for its blood. So different parts of you are more important than other parts. So if there's a certain part that doesn't get blood, like your brain, and it goes, well, I'm more important than everyone else, I'm getting the blood, and it'll knock you out so it gets the blood, right?
Hmm.
Another important part of us is our breathing. All right. The body knows this. But unlike our brain, this diaphragm here is a massive muscle group. And what I
Hmm.
understood was if that gets fatigued, it goes, I'm more important than the rest of you guys, and it can take up to 1/3 of your total blood volume away from your arms and legs.
Uh-huh. Uh-huh.
So these guys that were younger, fitter, faster, stronger than me, there came a point when their lungs failed, and you could hear it, you know,
Uh-huh.
and their
Uh-huh.
stronger arms had to, they had blood put to their diaphragm so it could breathe. But my weaker arms and legs had more blood in them, and I was still functioning because I understood that this muscle group here needed to be conditioned, you know. And again, the world we're in, it's more like health and beauty, not health and fitness, because real power is often unseen, and
Mhm.
it's the lungs that really show up powerfully when you are creating a lot of physical power over time. So
Mhm.
that's just a fun fact, even though it feels good, right? There's a massive performance side to developing this breath muscle that we have.
Uh-huh. Uh-huh. Yeah. Yeah. I believe that. I believe that. And what you were saying about, we get so distracted with so many different things going on, and a lot of those, things can, we can create our own stress by getting
Oh
so
yeah.
worked over some of the external things going on in our lives. And when we come back to that center, now we can get refocused, and we can take out all of the distractions and get focused on the things that are important. And yeah, so I'm totally with you on all of that. Man, I think we pretty much hit it all. Really quick, really quick. I think we covered a little bit. We talked about decision making a little bit, but I do see parents get hung up on, they just get caught up in the fear, around making a decision. And we talked about this a little bit before we started too, in that, it reminds me of the squirrel trying to cross the road and they can't make up their mind and they end up a flat squirrel, right? And
Yep.
it pays to be decisive in life. I learned that with my flying career. You have to make decisions, and you can't overthink it. You have to make the decision and move on. And so, what would you say? What kind of tips would you give to parents when it comes to making these tough decisions about their child? How do you make those calls and just move on and do what you need to do and not get caught up in the indecisiveness?
I would say put myself in that situation. If I was the child and someone else was the parent, what would I want that parent to do?
Yeah, you
Who would
want
I
your
who would I
family.
who would I want parenting me?
Yeah, yeah.
Would I want someone who's stressing out and enabling me, or you know, or would I want someone who actually knew what they were supposed to do, even though I was doing everything I could to distract? So I would put myself in the position of the child and say, if I was a child, what kind of parent would I want to have?
Mm. Mhm, mhm. There's nothing like when you're the person who is the follower, when you're in that role, there's nothing like having a leader who is decisive, who really has the leadership qualities, the leadership skills, and will make those decisions. And guess what? Leaders are humans too. And sometimes that leader may have some doubts. But just the fact that they make the decision, that they move forward, it's everyone will follow, and it is like you bring that power to the situation. It reminds me of a time when I was out deep sea fishing with a friend, and the engine quit. And we were in several hundred feet of water, about 600 feet of water, and all you could see was blue in every direction, not another boat in sight, no land anywhere. And we solved the problem and we made it back. But he shared with me later how stressed he was over that. But you would have never known it in the moment, right?
Mm,
He was cool as a cucumber in the moment, but he felt the responsibility to get myself and the other one or two people who were on board back safely. And he did. He showed that leadership. So he rose to the occasion. And that's what I would challenge parents to do in that moment. But you have to also be able to do these types of things here that are going to allow you to relieve that stress, because once he got back to dry land, he had to decompress a little bit, right?
yeah. Yep. Maybe do some breath work.
Right. so anyway, but you just reminded me of that story, of that time that we went on that trip. But man, it's been really, really great meeting you, Tim, and hanging out with you, and getting to know you a little bit better. And we have to do this again. And
Yeah,
and
happy to bring value to whoever's listening. And I just want to acknowledge you, Daryl, for creating this space, and bringing the gifts you have so generously, to others. You're still serving this country, and you've put your uniform to one side, but you still got a heart of service. So I want to acknowledge you for that.
Thank you. I appreciate that. I appreciate that. You mentioned earlier about how many other people are going through the same thing you're going through. Well, I can tell you, we lost over in the last several years running, we've lost over 100,000 people in this country to overdoses, drug overdoses alone, not including all the other drug related deaths. So there's plenty of other people going through the same thing you're going through if you're a parent out there listening to this, and you need to find those people as part of your healing process. But man, Tim, I would really encourage people to connect with you and to learn more about the breath work in bed, so they can get a good night's sleep, so they can be 100% the next day. My body tells me I need 7 hours now. I mean, if I go to sleep naturally and wake up naturally, is 7 hours is what I know I need. And I'm in that rhythm most nights. I know what I need and when I need to go to bed and when I need to wake up. And it's so important because you cannot, there's nothing worse than being a zombie and trying to get through the
Oh
day
yeah.
and function when you're not 100%, when you're not all there.
Yep.
Really
Yeah.
important. The things that you've shared are so important to help parents with relieving the stress and getting that good night's sleep. So tell the parents, tell the listeners out there how they can get in touch with you, how they
Yeah,
can
sure.
find
Okay.
out more about you and what you do.
Well, look, you can open your phone now to your app store, put in 3 words: breath work in bed. Like breakfast in bed, but breath work in bed. So the app, it's got a 28-day free trial. It'll ask you 2 questions: when you want to sleep, when you want to wake up. We take care of the rest. And what's going to happen is, even if you get to sleep well, some people often wake up at 3 a.m. And I know it can be pretty bloody lonely at 3 a.m. when your head's going a million miles an hour. So it's really comforting to know you've got something that you can push a button that'll tell you to breathe a certain way, and it'll get you back to sleep. There is a warning with that though, because at 3 a.m., your head normally has stress running the show, and it'll tell you, no, breathing won't work. Don't do it. Don't do it. But trust me when I say, you hit that breathwork button, you breathe a certain way, it's a chemical override. Know that you're going to have a friend at 3 a.m. when you need to get back to sleep. And also, there's been times when I've woken up at 2 and haven't been able to get to sleep till 4. Me laying there, just hitting repeat, doing breath work for 2 hours, it's like a magic patch. And you wake up in the morning with so much more energy than if I just stayed there cooking my head with all this stress and my thoughts. So connecting to your breath in those times that you do wake up, you will wake up with so much more energy. So if, of course, there's socials and blah, blah, blah. I don't like feeding people's eyeballs. I like feeding their soul. And,
Okay.
those two, if you could have 2 micro habits that'll change everything, is going to sleep with peace and waking up with power. If you can win the first 10 minutes of the day, you are going to win the day. You are going to be the person that negotiates with that day from a position of strength. It means so much to me for people to access their own medicine, because if you can't access your own medicine, we end up looking for it outside of ourselves. I looked for it in coffee, alcohol, pharmaceuticals, and like you said, the amount of people that are overdosing. We need to re-teach ourselves how to self-medicate. And my way of doing it is with the breath. And it's, like I said, super easy. Crack your phone, breath work in bed, and you'll have those 2 little micro habits that will set you up powerfully and bring the person you're supposed to be into the day.
Wow, that's great. Great. Well, thank you so much, Tim. I really appreciate you sharing with the listeners out there today and spending some time with me. And I will make sure to put your information in the podcast where they'll be able
Yep.
to find you too. So thank you so much again. And we'll talk to you soon.
No worries. Thanks, Daryl.
Thank you for tuning in to When God Intervenes. If you found today's episode helpful, please subscribe and leave a review. Your feedback helps us reach more families in need of hope and healing. For more resources and support, visit our website at thefamilyrecoverycoach.com. Until next time, stay strong and keep the faith.